Hello, making sense in the mad world. What's up, y'all? So yeah, check it out. I know we got the whole war thing going on, that silly war, this ridiculous war that's going on, but this planned war. I don't think it's going according to plan, but well, you never know with these evil people. You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do next? What type of distraction they gonna present us with? What type of next false flag move or whatever it is? Anyway, so a while back, I was talking about Charlie Kirk, and I was never a fan of him. However, I did align with some of the things he was talking about, with just like the LGBTQ transgender weirdo stuff. He was really on the front lines to that and correcting a lot of that behavior, and that's the reason why a lot of those people were super angry and celebrating his death. I can't get down with that, but Charlie Kirk was dangerous. Dude, I don't think he was a racist, but I feel like a lot of racist people listened to him, and he inspired a lot of racist dummies. And it's like, and what I'm talking about specifically is the systematic racism. He did not believe in that. And anybody, for one, if you listening to me, then you got to be honest with yourself. You know what I'm saying? I don't like all that fake shit. Systemic racism, it has showed up and it has showed its ass. And now we see it right now with these YNs and just this misguided in this whole battle with ourselves, putting ignorant shit on a pedestal in our culture, in our black culture, glorifying killing other brothers and disrespecting sisters and selling dope and all that kind of stuff. We put that stuff on a pedestal. We show respect to gangsters out here that was doing it. You know what I'm saying? And going to prison was like a rite of passage in our community, and we glorified that. We didn't glorify the engineers and the scientists and the people that was really good at spelling and, that was smart. We did to our athletes because everybody wanted to be an athlete, and athletes wanted to be rappers. So it was a cycle that our culture was in. And a lot of that negative stuff that gets blown up, and amplified, World Star did not do our community any favors. And then us out here sharing these videos and just not having any self-awareness, and then we got people who already don't like us that are gonna put us on platforms with that stuff and amplify that ignorance. So you got these stereotypes about us that aren't real. So when you say that systemic racism ain't a thing, it is. And, when people aren't afforded the same type of opportunities that other families are, like, you got one family that's worried how they going to pay bills and keep some food on the table. And you got other families worried because they missed the valet practice or, archery practice or, golf lessons or piano lessons or something like that. We had different types of struggles. And I'm not saying that, they don't have their own challenges, but there's a degree of challenges that are given with the difference of us. So anyway, I'm going on and on. I want to show y'all this video.
Believe there is any evidence of systemic racism in this country?
Absolutely not. No. There's no evidence of systemic racism, meaning that there's no laws that are written with the intent or even the conclusion to harm certain different communities based on the color of their skin.
Zero down payment home loans. This was supposed to be the great equalizer, home ownership for everyone. But in practice, it worked very differently for black veterans. Here's how the housing exclusion worked. 1. Banks could refuse loans. The GI Bill guaranteed home loans, but banks still had to approve them. And banks routinely denied loans to black veterans. They used racist criteria like neighborhood stability and property values to justify the denials. In practice, this meant we don't lend to black people. The federal government knew this was happening. They did nothing. 2. The Federal Housing Administration enforced segregation. The Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, backed most of the mortgages issued under the GI Bill. But the FHA had a policy. They would only insure mortgages in racially homogeneous neighborhoods. This meant that if a black family tried to buy a home in a white neighborhood, the FHA wouldn't insure the loan. And if a white family tried to buy a home in a black neighborhood, the FHA wouldn't insure that either. The FHA explicitly designed its policies to keep neighborhoods segregated. The FHA published maps of every major city in the United States with neighborhoods color-coded by risk. Green neighborhoods were safe for investment. These were white middle-class areas. Red neighborhoods were hazardous. These were black neighborhoods. This is where the term redlining comes from, as banks used these maps to decide who got loans. If you were black and tried to buy a home in a red neighborhood, banks wouldn't lend to you. And if you tried to buy a home in a green neighborhood, banks wouldn't lend to you either, because you were black. The result? Between 1944 and 1952, the federal government backed millions of home loans. Less than 2% went to non-white borrowers. Less than 2%. 3. Restrictive covenants.
So if you want to have a real conversation with anybody, you have to acknowledge this. And, and I'm not one for excuses, but this is the truth. When you get handed down trauma and debt and anxiety and all this kind of stuff, it has an effect on the kids. So having a real conversation, that needs to be acknowledged. So you hear somebody talking slicker or whatever it is, saying some shit about black people or this and that, you better acknowledge that. This, what we're dealing with here, and the erasure of some of these things, or just to be blind to it, that's not progressive. And I'm not cool with leaning on that, because a lot of those situations that forced you to grow up a little faster made me grind the way that I do. It makes me who I am to be in life where I was, because I didn't grow up with any money. You know what I'm saying? My mom went to prison when I was 7 years old. That's the only reason why I'm in Colorado. And I ain't finna get into all that right now, but we were somewhat of a product of our environment, but we didn't let all that mess with us. We had some support in our family, but there's kids that never, with parents that have no self-awareness at all, with no support, with no even thoughts of getting out of the hood or whatever type of situation they in. So I don't want to hear that bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, slavery affected our people deeply, and systemic racism absolutely did. So if you can't acknowledge that, then fuck you, get off my channel. Check this out, folks.
17,000 homes. Not a single one was sold to a black family until the 1960s. So black veterans came home from the war, tried to use their GI Bill benefits to buy a home, and were denied. Not because they didn't qualify, but because the government and banks conspired to keep them out. White veterans bought homes. Those homes appreciated in value. They built wealth. They passed that wealth to their children. Black veterans rented. They built no wealth, and their children inherited nothing. Let's talk about what this meant in real terms. Home ownership is the primary way American families build wealth. When you own a home, it appreciates in value. You build equity. You can borrow against it. You can pass it to your children. Home ownership is generational wealth. After World War II, white veterans used the GI Bill to buy homes in the suburbs. In 1940, the home ownership rate for white families was about 45%. By 1960, it was over 60%. That's a massive increase, driven almost entirely by the GI Bill. Black home ownership rates barely moved. In 1940, about 23% of black families owned homes. By 1960, it was 38%, still far behind white families. And the homes black families did own were in redlined neighborhoods, which meant they didn't appreciate in value the same way. A white family...
Home ownership is so important, and it seems like that is a reality that is slowly being snatched away with this war going on. Social safety net program, money for that, money for the war, but can't feed the poor. Anyway, I just wanted to leave that on here. Power to the people.